Hello, everybody. This is the regular weekly Gateway API meeting. Today is September 10th, and we have a packed agenda. In the meantime, I remind you all that this meeting is regulated by the CNCF Code of Conduct, so please be nice to each other. And oh yeah, if you want, you can go to this document and write down your name here in the list. Also, if there is someone new to this meeting and who wants to introduce yourself, please go ahead. Otherwise, I guess we can start. Yeah.
I'm happy to introduce myself. Hi, I'm Adam. I work for HPE, but I'm here independently.
Welcome.
Welcome.
I'm here because I have a question, hopefully later.
Cool. Yeah, if you want to drop an item in the list, feel free, so that we'll discuss your item. Oh,
yeah,
it's already here.
Right at the
it's
bottom.
Great. Yeah.
Mattia, can you make your window
Bigger?
narrower? No, narrower, so that the text is bigger.
Oh, doing this is better.
That's much better.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry
You
about
can
that.
also like if you close the outline view, that helps too.
Too many requirements.
Andrew? Yeah, Andrew, you raised your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah. Just wanted to also say hi. My name is Andrew Timmis. I'm a platform engineer with SeatGeek, and we're in the process of spinning up both Kong and Cilium side by side in clusters. So we've become heavy users of the Gateway API, and I think Flynn had responded to my message in the Katie's
Hi,
Gateway
I'm
API
Flynn.
Select channel. Hey, nice to meet you. Yeah, just wanted to talk a little bit about our experience and pain points and so on and so forth so far with utilizing both vanilla Gateway API and then Gamma routes side by side.
Awesome. Welcome.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank
cool.
you.
Welcome.
Okay. I guess we can start with the discussion. The first one is an item for v1.2. Rob, do you want to start with it? Or
Yeah, sure. I think so. Something got screwed up along the way because the changelog and 1.2 review got merged together, which is usually not what we do. But suffice to say, there's a changelog now, and there's a 1.2 review, and we'll figure out the details. But thank you to Nick and Shane for turning those into reality. The changelog in particular, I think, will be useful when crafting a blog post, which is coming up real soon as well. Yeah, so not a lot to say there. Shane, I don't know if you have more comments. You actually did the PR, so I don't know if there's anything.
I just cherry picked in Nick's changelog and then did a diff against the API's directory. So please do take a look. And I guess I would add, probably be good just in general if you always like mention these API reviews to your product managers if they're interested in Gateway API, that kind of stuff. Have them take a look at them too. These kinds of people don't often show up in upstream, but often have a lot of good insights.
Yeah. Do we have a sense of when the 1.2 API review meeting with upstream might happening?
We actually already did that at the we already did that at the most recent SIG Network meeting. Instead of trying to schedule a one-off, we just did it in SIGNet. There were a couple useful comments that I think have been addressed since then, and I don't remember hearing any hesitation about what we're doing, but we do need to get the formal sign off still. So I didn't see any red flags. So
excellent.
yeah. The other thing I just want to mention is Gaurav made some really great cell tests, which are incredible and help keep us honest and ensure that our validation actually works. The problem is that we weren't testing across a range of Kubernetes versions. And when Mattia did that, thank you, they failed, which great, exciting. Fortunately, the failure was because cell validation messages changed in Kubernetes 128. And so, Hiram's law, whatever, I'm sure they didn't really assume this was going to be the testing, something like that they would get caught on, but that is what it is. I think everything's been addressed, but that was the cause of a bit of a delay to our process of trying to figure out, okay, why are these failing? Do we need to delay more? But that has been resolved as of yesterday. So I think we're good to keep moving. The next one that we really need to work on, Flynn, you volunteered to do a blog post, something I haven't mentioned to anyone yet, and the idea really came to me yesterday. So not thinking this
You're
through
not
very
making
much.
me feel good about volunteering here, Rob.
Yeah. So in the past, we've always tried to launch our blog post at the very same time as a release. And what that always means is that when the blog post comes out, people can read it but not do anything with it, because no implementation support our release at day 0. I would love for that to change, but reality is it needs to be released before anyone can actually support it. Is there, some fixed delay that we can build into this or future releases where we say we will publish a blog post N weeks after release, and we will feature implementations that support the release at that point in time? Or, not to say those are the exclusive implementations, but if you want to try this today, you can test out implementation foo, Acme, whatever, right?
We could always hold the blog post until, do most of it, but then always just insert some implementation names once we hear that implementations are supporting it. It doesn't have to be a fixed delay.
It's one of those things where I want to give implementations some kind of predictable, again, with all the changes to our release process, have some kind of predictable timeline that if you get your changes, if you release by X date, then, you will be featured in blog post, as opposed to if you're one of the first 2, then you'll get featured, not entirely sure. Don't need to do it this time. Just trying to think of ways that we can make these blog posts more useful, as opposed to, oh, this is something that I might be able to use a few months from now, or hopefully less.
So I like the idea. I like the idea. I'm not sure how long the time frame ought to be. Folks who are working more directly with adding it to implementations might have an opinion there. 2-3 weeks comes immediately to mind, but I don't know if that's actually enough time to have anybody do some sort of a release.
Yeah. Okay, well, either way, we should work on having a draft blog post out, but maybe can ask in Slack to see, if I don't think I want to wait any longer than a month. I do want it to be fairly timely, but if there are some implementations that think that they could have, support plus release out in that time frame, then maybe we should consider a bit of a delay. I have not thought this through all the way, but yeah.
Anybody working with implementations who expects that they're going to have 1.2 implemented in the next few weeks after release?
Probably, yeah, probably at Kong we are gonna have the supported features field in gateway class status right after 1.2, because we are releasing like 1 month from now. So probably we are going to include 1.2 with this feature.
Anybody else?
I don't see anyone working on Istio on this call, but they have historically been one of the first. I also don't see Arco on this call.
Yeah, I would expect Envoy Gateway to adopt fairly quickly due to the way they do things.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're
So
some more conversation.
What's the lingering conversation to have there? Just to rephrase it real quick, reiterate.
So basically, I think the thing we want to ask in Slack is if we were to delay the blog post by up to 1 month, which implementations, if any, would be ready and released by then?
Thank you. I got tuned into a Slack explosion for a second, so I appreciate that.
Oh, that never happens.
Getting me back over here. Cool.
Cool.
Okay. Second topic is about KubeCon.
Oh yeah, I should have put my name to this one. I just added this. I feel like so previous KubeCons, we've had very useful conversations about, just in person of the people that can attend about various topics. And this one in particular feels like we're going to have a ton of complicated topics that could benefit from more in-person discussion for whoever is there. It can just be a bit higher bandwidth. The topics I was thinking of are authorization, LLM routing, just as Shane has mentioned, trying to improve overall adoption in UX. Policy seems like a perennial
particularly
topic.
from the developer persona's perspective.
Yeah. Policy seems like a perennial topic. And then listener sets and merging, we really do want to revisit that in time for 1.3. I don't think Dave's on this call, but I think he'll be at KubeCon at least. Yeah, so those are areas that I've been thinking of, and ideally, if we can track these, we can set aside time that is focused. So if you only care about 2 of these topics, you can show up to just meetings that cover them instead of having to show up to things you don't care about.
When you say policy, you mean policy attachment?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And then Shane and Flynn, you're doing a talk about just contribution in general.
The difficulties of contributing to Kubernetes with some emphasis on the rising need/trend of using CRDs to get around contributing directly in core.
We're still debating a little bit on the title and the saltiness thereof. So
to be clear, I do not think that, I'm going to be biased here, but I do not think that we're using CRDs to get around contributing to Kubernetes. We are very much contributing to Kubernetes.
I think we are using CRDs to get around some of the process involved in getting contributions into core, though. And
sure.
I don't mean that as, oh my God, look at this horrible thing we're doing. I'm just saying that, yeah, I believe that we are doing that. And that is one of the things that Shane and I want to talk about, that it's hard to get stuff in core. And we have to, we as a community, we should really take a look at that.
Yeah, well, yeah, okay. I could go down a rabbit hole for many.
Oh, we could spend the entire meeting talking about this. It would be really easy. Let's not.
I'll hold off. I see a couple of hands. I'm not sure who was first, but
Guy was first.
Okay.
thanks, Rob, for putting this together. This doesn't seem to be a closed list by any means, but so I took the liberty to add the voting chips on top of it to give it kind of a notion of interest. However, I seem not to have been able to make them work. So if anybody knows how to get those to work, at least I cannot vote on them. So if anybody can, okay.
I also cannot click them.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Who just clicked on LLM routing? Who was that?
It was me.
That
How
was
did you do
me.
it?
I don't know how I can do it.
I think some of it, I think it comes down to
whether
I'm
you're
logged into
authenticated or not. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm logged into Google, but I still show up as anonymous small animal or whatever it is. And so I think that's the difference. But I don't actually know how to fix that, given that I'm already logged into Google, so I should not be anonymous.
Same.
I would love to
Yeah,
know if
and
anybody knows
Are
how
you
to fix
logged into
that.
your? Are you logged in with your Gmail, Flynn, or with your core?
I'm logged in as flynn@buoyant.io, which is a Gmail account.
I don't know. Weird.
Yeah, it's
In
weird.
any case, it's not like anyone who has this link is an editor of the doc, so it's not an access. I don't know what it is.
Yeah,
you should ask someone who
really
works
strange.
for Google. I mean,
I cannot.
Okay, hey Rob, how do we fix this?
I'll have to.
I would accept redirection to somebody else who works for Google too. That would be fine. I would actually really like to know how to fix that. But maybe for the moment we should just drop the cool voting things and put numbers there or something.
Yeah, maybe just put your
the voting
first
things
name.
look cool.
First
maybe
name
with the
in
name.
print.
Yeah.
I have a similar comment on that list. So, I mean, maybe a suggestion. If we want to make these slots kind of effective, maybe we should also have a one-pager for an agenda, like, and then people will add pre-KubeCon, because then, we could just meet and speak about random stuff. But like, I guess there are some stuff that people really want to push for, especially on the listeners merging or other stuff. So yeah, maybe if we put some high-level agenda, it will make the meetings a bit more effective.
Did we do I remember correctly that the project pavilion is actually trying to make it easier to have this kind of discussions at the project pavilion this time around?
It will be, George got it in a closed room, so it won't be on like the main floor with all the shouting, with the intention that you'd be able to have more like sit down and talk about a project. Yeah.
Might make it easier. Although I think time has always been the problem, more than anything else.
Yeah. But I think it gives more legitimacy to the hallway track, so I'm down with that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Cool. Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to it for whoever can make it to KubeCon, and at the very least, we'll try and take some notes for anyone who can't. But yeah, not trying to make any binding decisions at KubeCon, but it can be easier to have some, in-person, higher bandwidth discussions when we are together. So cool. Shane, I think you're next.
Yep, this is just a little call out. We've had this for a couple years. It's moved slowly, but there are unofficial-ish, most unofficial, Gateway API bindings for Rust. There's been a little bit more of a crowd, like a couple more people have showed up, and it's just been a while since I pointed out that this existed over in kubeRS. It's not in Kubernetes SIGs. So if you're interested, there are Rust bindings. If you're not, no worries.
I'm interested, Shane, do you have any action items, like any open items to work on there, or it's just like FYI?
Oh dear God, yes.
This was mostly meant as an FYI, but yes, there's quite a bit to do there. One of the things that we want to do that's maybe not, I think it's critical to ever getting to this being official, is we need to be able to, currently what this does is uses a tool called Copium, which is hilariously named, I think, to go eat the CRDs upstream and then generate Rust code from that. That process is mostly pretty solid, but one of the things that isn't too great is it can't infer currently when two subtypes of any particular struct are the same in upstream. Like it'll create different separate structs for them that aren't
a good example
compatible.
of this will be that backend ref in an HTTP route and backend ref in a gRPC route will end up being different Rust types. If you're doing this in Python, no one would care. If you're doing it in Rust, it sucks.
Everyone cares. So there's things like that. There's just some general, like, we originally kind of built this for Blixt, and there's now a couple of use cases that are not toy projects. So I think part of what we need is actually people who have real needs telling us what we need to do next, in addition to some of the things we know that we need to do. But there's certainly plenty of things to do. But defining the path is actually something we need help with. So
I see. And like, to be clear, the problem you're mentioning, is it in the tool, right? It's nothing in this code. So the tool just not able to
depends. We've looked at a couple of different ways of solving the problem, and one of them would be actually somehow annotating the CRDs in upstream so that languages other than Go can understand when there is basically a type that is shared across different CRDs. That was one thing that we actually put a discussion for in the Gateway API repository proper. We haven't made a decision on exactly what our plan is for that yet, but we could do it in the tool.
Okay.
It's a good opportunity to contribute to kubeRS too, if that's kind of just something that sounds good to you. So just wanted to point that out because it's been a while since we mentioned it in one of these calls that it exists. There are a few downstream users now. It's growing.
Cool. Thank you, Shane. Leo, yours is next. Source labels routing.
Can you come back to the agenda though? I think you're still sharing the kubeRS.
Am I?
No, I see the agenda.
I see the agenda.
All right, so maybe it's me. I don't see the agenda, but I'll speak for it. So yeah, I started a thread on last week, on the source labels thing that Istio is doing. I couldn't find any other implementation that it's doing, but essentially, you're able to define, basically. Oh, now I see the agenda. To basically filter traffic based on pod source labels, and the way it is done is, just push different configs to different sidecars. And I just wanted to know, and we had some interesting discussion. I can elaborate on some user stories, which I prefer not to elaborate there because it would be a huge thread. But there are some feature requests in some different implementations, one of which I pinned in the last comment for Linkerd a few years ago. And yeah, I wanted to know, kind of gauge the interest and see, what people think about it.
I think it would be really interesting to see, and maybe it would be better in written form than on this meeting. I'm not sure. I think it'd be really interesting to see some of the use cases you have in mind. I note that your Linkerd request is kind of old and has not been implemented in Linkerd, which could mean lots of different things, actually. But it certainly makes me interested to hear your use cases.
Rob?
Yeah, anytime I see these kind of label matching, not that we shouldn't do it, it just, it doesn't really feel like HTTP matching, so it, it feels a little, I guess you can say the same thing we're doing with mesh, where we have a parent ref that translates to an HTTP like match, but it takes an indirect way to get there. This feels a little funky to me, and also with label matching, it can be a scalability nightmare if your system isn't designed just right to make it work. So don't want to say, we shouldn't do it, but I guess I'm in Flint's camp of we should, understand why more first.
So Rob, you're also saying we should drop gamma as well, right? That's what I was hearing there.
Exactly. Yeah.
To be clear, like Rob, I mean, it's not that you need to keep labels map or something, right? The way that Istio do it, at least as far as I could look, it's using just like when you generate the configs for each sidecar. So you access to the label, and then you just don't push the you don't push the configs to the sidecars that shouldn't be able to reach it. So it's not like
the way Linkerd handles the sidecars, that would be Linkerd doesn't really have a concept of generating a configuration that's pushed to a sidecar. It is a very, very different implementation, just for the record.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like, to be clear, it doesn't matter how it's implemented, right? It matters if the feature is requested. I'm interested, like how, like if, let's say if we collect, like if we can find, I don't know, like what would be a good way to show that the feature is requested, like a few issues on different implementation, and then maybe a doc with user stories, like trying to think. Because like, as I said, like the way I started to came, like people, to be clear, people that want to migrate to Gateway API, and they are using source labels, and from two different companies, kind of say, oh, we're just about migrating, but then like it doesn't support source labels, so we can't really migrate to Gateway APIs. So,
I kind of feel like a discussion on the Gateway API repo is a good way to talk about the use cases, or, I mean, or a Google Doc, I guess, but.
Okay. And then, okay, I mean, sorry, go ahead.
One thought I'd have is, although, like you said, an API like this is not necessarily tied to implementation details, it seems on the surface like it really favors a specific model, like a specific variation of sidecar, maybe. I don't know, like if sidecars weren't in the picture, maybe that's more challenging. I don't really know, right? Or if sidecars are done differently. I don't know. Worth more discussion, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do want to encourage and enable adoption of Gateway API though for other threads. So if that's part of the rationale, that's worth discussing.
I mean, I guess kind of a teaser to the user stories is like a lot of the user stories are about, you have some controllers or some different kinds of, when people just spin up testing environments or canary versions of things, and then you mock a lot of the environment, and then some request, and then they're leveraging Istio in this case, but like it doesn't necessarily need to be tied to Istio, but they're leveraging, okay, if the request came with a pod with the canary label, or a pod that it's a test or a dynamic environment, so then you need to route it to the corresponding things. That's at least what I've heard. But yeah, I mean, I can elaborate on a discussion, but yeah. And lastly, on this note, before we move on, so there was on the same thread that I linked, some people mentioned about source namespace needed for Gamma, and I wanted to know if anyone on this call understands it, because I am not sure I'm on the same page.
What's source namespace?
So if you
Mike Morris on this call after all?
Hi, yeah, I had a conflict. I missed the first 30 minutes.
Awesome. Implicitly in I think John was just saying that.
Yeah, I didn't really
John was just. I think. Sorry, don't want to try to speak too much for John, but I think he was just drawing a parallel between the source namespace and a label as similar kinds of metadata that weren't specifically HTTP routing, but we already do it. That was how I interpreted that anyway. Does that make sense, Mike?
Maybe. Like I see how they're similar. Yeah. I think necessary is strong. I think maybe convenient to add if we're also adding source labels or something like that.
What do you mean? Like, I think what John mentioned is that it's already in Gamma. Am I wrong?
Implicitly, yeah. We already do things in Gamma somewhat differently, whether you're in the producer namespace or a consumer namespace, right?
Yeah. So if source namespace is already supported, it's going to be interesting to me to see A, how it is supported, and B, if source labels could be easily supported. But like, I don't understand how it is implemented yet because I haven't go and read the source namespace.
I personally tend to feel that the source namespace is kind of a necessary evil more than anything else. But yeah, I would tend to agree with Candace that maybe shifting this over to a repo discussion might be a good way to move forward.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything explicit in any of the Gamma GEPs about source namespace. Like, we talk explicitly about like producer and consumer, but like,
actually, that's a really interesting point. It's really the route namespace, not the namespace of the source of the traffic, and we should be clear about that.
Okay, I'll follow up offline then.
Yeah, and like some of this like implicitly overlaps with like identity things where like in some meshes things within the same namespace are implicitly trusted, and others that may not be the case. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Discussion with more details. Sounds good.
Yeah. Let's move on. Beta removal.
Sorry, Mattia.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm also interested in how this conversation on the labels evolve, especially if it has any potential to set any reference for applications in the policy realm, right? I know this is a bit of a stretch of the concept, but at least the two implementations that I'm more familiar with, Istio and Envoy gateways, they both went for using labels for applying configuration based on policies to their gateways, right? Thus deviating a bit from the spec. To be fair, Istio did not deviate. Istio always had that label selector for their kind of policies. Later on, they add, the target ref, but without deprecating label selector nonetheless. Whereas Envoy Gateway was a deliberate decision, right? They understood that for their use cases, the only way, to support applying those kinds of configuration to the gateways would be through labels rather than by identifying specific resources. Anyway, as I said, it's a bit of a stretch, but I'm interested to see if whatever decision we come up to for the general case, it's also means I don't know, some reference for policies.
Sounds good. Yeah, if I end up open the discussion, I'll CC you there.
Yep, thanks.
Yeah. Cool. Flynn or Mike, proposal to remove beta from upstream.
I added this before I realized that Mike was on the call. Mike posted this on Slack, and I wanted to take a quick opportunity to use this doc to point people to this, since it is an interesting thing that's kind of adjacent to Gateway API, and I wanted to sneak in and do that before we got on to the other three agenda topics, which look like they are likely to run us out of time.
Yeah, it has been hard for me to not respond on this, but I've had way too many things going on. Obviously, Gateway was first, so yay us.
Responding seems like it would be a good thing for you to do, Rob.
I know, it very much would. I currently
for the record, I had no further agenda other than, hey, people should look at this. So I'm now done.
Yeah, basically just like, let's get somebody like, I think Rob probably has the most context on this of sharing like what we've tried in Gateway API, what has worked, what hasn't worked, what like difficult unsolved problems we still have. Like one of the big ones that was highlighted early in this thread upstream or for Kubernetes is adding new fields to an existing V1 resource, which is something that we've used experimental channel for, and it's still hard because the resource is lying to you. It says V1 on it, and it is maybe not for some fields.
Yeah,
there's a much
Kubernetes
much
versioning
larger,
is. Yeah. I have a whole shameless plug. I have a whole talk at KubeCon this year about how Kubernetes versioning is broken. So Yay.
Send me a link. Send me a link to that talk because, yeah.
Yeah, sure thing.
Don't come up with difficult questions though, Flynn.
I have literally stood up in meetings at work and said Kubernetes versioning is fundamentally broken. We need to be aware of that. So, yeah, I anticipate being in support of Rob, but possibly also having difficult questions. Sorry, Rob.
I'll make sure I don't leave any room for questions. I'll just keep on
That
going
was
until
that was the point of that warning. Yeah. Burn all your time. Sorry. Gateway API usage with load balancers. I'm glad that Mike showed up as well.
Hi, folks. So I am currently, just as a personal project, trying to basically fit Cloudflare D and Cloudflare tunnels into the Gateway API, effectively using them as a load balancer rather than a reverse proxy. I was looking for example implementations, and I found an issue for MetalLB from 2021, basically saying, hey, could you implement the Gateway API? And based on that discussion, it sounds like it would be quite a large undertaking for them because it requires a fair amount of shifting extra responsibility onto the load balancer. So my question is, am I missing something? Or is there something maybe missing in the Gateway API for implementing load balancers? What I intuitively would like to achieve is something like a gateway route that just says, if you receive traffic, send it to a reverse proxy, whether it uses the Gateway API or not. I know that lots of the current implementations, they will by default generate a service of type load balancer. So I'm kind of not sure if I've spotted a gap or if I'm just missing something.
So just to make sure I'm understanding, you're talking about creating an L4 load balancer that's programmed by Gateway, well, that is configured with Gateway API.
Yeah, so I'm aware that for me, I know that I could just implement a TCP route, a UDP route, and that would work for my use case. But for example, with MetalLB, because it operates at layer 3, they could implement that, but that would be moving more responsibility to them. I'm not aware of other load balancer implementations and how it would affect those. So I'm sort of wondering, should there be something like a layer 3 route, or I don't know.
I mean, not to unfortunately be the bearer of bad news, I would say that anything below L7 in this API has been poorly invested in, and we just have not had the time or really interest to drive that story as well as we'd like. But I see there are hands that may be saying similar things. I wish it was a better story there, but most of the implementations right now are pretty L7 focused.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, so I think like I accidentally actually, I think a day or two ago, just read the whole thread you had there on Slack, and I didn't really understand the use case, like whether. So it'll be nice if you kind of explain what the traffic flow would look like. So you want to get traffic to the Cloudflare tunnel, and then from the Cloudflare tunnel to a reverse proxy, right?
Yes. So I don't personally want to re-implement all the routing. I want to hand that off to the reverse proxy.
And this Cloudflare tunnel is like I have no context, but is it something that lives in the cluster, outside the cluster, or like how does it work?
So this does live in the cluster with some external configuration for Cloudflare. but you can think of it. I'm using it because I'm behind CGNet.
Oh,
But you can think of it as effectively, I get a public domain name and I can point that to my reverse proxy. That's kind of what I'm trying to achieve. And you can do that, or it's I'm just trying to do this with the Gateway API.
So you want the Gateway API routes to configure what? To configure a reverse proxy in the cluster, or to configure the Cloudflare tunnel?
Just the tunnel. So I want to leave the reverse proxy configuration to whatever reverse proxy I or anyone else would choose.
Okay. I wonder if, Rob, I mean, or every cloud implementation, I wonder, because when you do a Gateway API with cloud implementation, then it literally creates a load balancer, right? And then
yeah, but that would tightly couple me to the reverse proxy, I think, unless there's a neat way to do that.
What do you mean?
The service of type load balancer is just a generic layer 4 thing, and then it's very easy to stick a reverse proxy behind that. What I was going to ask was when you say there's a piece of this in the cluster, are you describing what you want, or are you describing the current reality?
So the way that Cloudflare tunnels work is that you have one or more replicas of a pod that sends an outbound request to Cloudflare and creates a persistent tunnel so that traffic can flow in through that open connection.
And what does it do with the other end of that connection? When traffic arrives, what does it do?
So you can use it as a reverse proxy, but you can also just write configuration to say, point this to, in my case, a reverse proxy. Just, forward all TCP packets or everything.
Are you really saying forward this to a reverse proxy, or are you saying forward this to a specific Kubernetes service?
Yeah, it would be the service that's backed by a reverse proxy.
If it's already in the cluster, I would think that you can just launch the reverse proxy, allocated Kubernetes service to it, and then tell your tunnel endpoint, forward all of your traffic to this reverse proxy, and everything will just work. And the reason I believe this is that is the way we tell people to use ALBs and such with Emissary from years ago.
Yeah, but I think you want to implement it with Gateway API, right?
I didn't say necessarily you do that with Gateway API, because I agree with Rob. Nothing below layer 7 is well invested in Gateway API. And
if that's
unless you're willing to drive it, it is
I just, because the Gateway API front page talks about load balancers as one of its use cases, so I wasn't sure if there is this functionality that I'm maybe not aware of, or if there is actually a hole. And if there is, that's fair enough.
Yeah, I don't think that I don't think you're missing anything.
Okay.
No, yeah. To clarify, at least in Google Cloud and maybe other clouds, we refer to L7 load balancers as load balancers.
Okay.
So I think that, I think load balancers more broadly is certainly a goal. But even at L7, I think that was the idea of load balancer.
Right. Okay. Well, fair enough. Thanks.
I appreciate you bringing this to the meeting, because I actually kind of lost track.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm glad that you brought it up again. I think this is, I know you're not hearing like anything that sounds super great, but I think the conversation is worth continuing to have. What's your level of comfortability with following up on this with kind of a reiteration of it in a discussion on the repo?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Appreciate it if you would. I missed this in Slack, and I apologize for that. And this is very relevant to my areas of interest, so I'd be happy to join in on that discussion.
Yeah,
cool.
And I think others would too. There, it'll just be more. It'll be more asynchronous, but with Slack, things disappear up a little bit easier.
Yeah, of course.
So.
And if you ping in Slack that you just opened this discussion, I think I'll pop in as well. And also, I think it'll be important to maybe in plain English, explain specific requirement for Gateway API, because I feel like
yeah.
different people in the call, I think, understand different things, and I
Sure.
still think I understand something else than others here. So, like for the requirement, so yeah, if you kind of put an emphasis on the requirement, it will be useful.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
If you can do like a what and why right up front with, you know, requirements and kind of like exactly, you know, what got you to the how, that would be very helpful for that discussion.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And also something that Adam didn't bring here is that he like referenced an ingress ability, right? An ability to do it with Ingress Nginx, if I remember correctly, Adam, right?
Yeah, so I was just trying to reference Nginx there as a just as an example ingress. So this is currently technically possible with other APIs. I was just trying to see if I could implement this with the Gateway API.
That's interesting because Ingress Nginx is, I mean, I'm not an expert on it, but it's not an L7, right? So it's not an L4. It's an L7. Sorry, it's not an L4.
It can do down to layer 4, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway,
most of the things that call themselves Ingress controllers that I'm aware of have some capability for doing simple L4, and Ingress Nginx certainly can.
With annotations, probably.
Often. But, you know, like Emissary, for example, has TCP route. And so you can tell it to do TCP routing, and it works fine with no annotations. I mean, you can use annotations for that if you really want to, but you don't have to. I don't actually remember how you configure Ingress Nginx, but I'm pretty sure it has that basic take anything that arrives on this port and send it over to this service functionality. And most of the Ingress controllers seem to have at least that in some way.
Starting the discussion on this seems good. Yeah, there's several different variations of this model with different mixes of like mesh internal capabilities to have an integrated ingress, a mesh external ingress thing, some cloud load balancer. There's several different scenarios to consider here, and it's all complex and layered, and there's at least like 2 different like core models for how this stuff can all plumb together. I linked some Istio meeting notes that went through a similar discussion about this, and I'll drop the link to the existing Gamma issue in the meeting notes for this too.
Well, thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for bringing this to me. This is a good discussion.
Yeah, thank you. Rob, LLM?
Oh yeah, real quick. No need to open that, but meetings are Thursdays at 10 a.m. Pacific. But if you're interested in this whole LLM gateway meeting, whatever, it's happening. It's a work group of working group serving with the current intention of building a gateway API compatible API. Wow, that's a mouthful. But something that slots nicely into Gateway API and maybe eventually becomes a part of the API. But right now it's in pretty rapid iteration. So just FYI, if you're interested, it exists. Had a good turnout, maybe around 25 people for the kickoff meeting last week, and another one in a couple days. So
still waiting on the invited agenda. Maybe we should link it.
I think it goes to everyone on the working group serving mailing list. Let me double check. Yeah, I think it's everyone on working group serving. So just like other KUBE meetings, if you're on the mailing list, you'll get the invite.
Yeah, probably a bunch.
And it's a weekly meeting, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool, thank you. And Andrew, your item is the last one.
Got not a ton of time, so I'll try to speedrun this. Like I said at the top, we are at SeatGeek in the middle of trying to stand up a service mesh that is looking at gamma routes. When we brought up So we already have an operator managing gateway HTTP routes for north-south traffic. And when we brought up the second operator to start managing the east-west gamma routes, we ran into a couple of bugs where one operator wasn't always able to differentiate vanilla routes from gamma routes, and it was trying to reconcile one as the other. And then one operator was not properly filtering the list of gateway routes it was watching, non-gamma routes, based on parent lineage, and the two operators started trying to essentially reconcile that same HTTP route in a tight loop.
So without intending to name and shame here, can you tell us which implementations you're talking about? And the reason I ask is that I have seen bugs with Linkerd and others where sometimes various implementations did the wrong thing, and it can be very, very helpful for figuring out who to talk to.
Yeah, so I have a pull request open with Cilium to fix the east-west issues that I came across. Kong was our north-south traffic controller, which I believe is doing most of the things we expect it to be doing correctly. There's a couple of dereferencing issues that we're finding that we will bring up to support there as well. But these bugs basically boil down to operators don't always play nice together. The issue we were seeing with HTTP routes being reevaluated by two separate operators in a tight loop, because that was caused by a bug where one operator was not properly following the lineage of, all right, I look at the HTTP route, I look at the parent ref, that leads me to a gateway, I look at the parent ref of that leads me to a gateway class, which has a label or annotation, I forget, specifying which controller that gateway class belongs to. Those two operators, like, that's a solvable problem, and it boils down to there was a bug in the implementation of one of them just wasn't following that lineage correctly.
Right.
But I worry that with gamma routes, as far as I can tell, there is no similar chain of lineage that points to a specific controller to say, all right, this particular gamma route should be managed by this controller. I feel like I read at some point in a GEP that there was a rationale to not label gamma routes in that way under the assumption that there's only ever one service mesh in a cluster. I don't know if that GEP was ever accepted. I tried finding it before this meeting and couldn't figure out where I had seen it before. But
yeah,
as someone who's...
Sorry, go ahead.
As someone who's currently trying to work with two gateway operators at the same time, that I don't think either one gates gamma functionality and gateway functionality behind different feature flags. The reality of what I'm seeing is I've got multiple operators that are looking at those resources at the same time, and I think that's going to be a need regardless of whether or not the adage of there's only one service mesh ends up holding true. Because we are, like, I am in the middle of doing a service mesh migration, so we're going to have two service meshes. Only one of them is using gamma routes now, but in the future, I think this could be a pain point.
The way it is, so sorry, let me back up.
Sorry,
no mesh, no gamma compliant mesh is ever supposed to take ownership of a route, or more accurately, is ever supposed to take ownership of the part of a route that says it's bound to a gateway, full stop. So if you have a route and its only parent refs are all gateways, no gamma compliant mesh should ever touch those. I would like to note that that is the morally prescriptive should, and we have certainly seen instances where meshes did not actually do that correctly, but they need to be fixed.
Unless that waypoint, or unless that gateway is a Istio ambient waypoint that where a controller name specifically references like the mesh controller.
So we will leave aside Istio and ambient evilness until Mike and I get a chance to have the steel cage match about why he's wrong and I am right, and we'll move on. more seriously, Mike, yeah, oh man, we really have to talk about that. I did not, I have not previously heard that. I've not previously heard that, and now I'm very alarmed. Andrew, I would be very, very interested in hearing more about cases where you have multiple meshes running in a single namespace. I have run across situations where you're doing a mesh migration where you have multiple meshes running. I've never run across one where you have multiple meshes trying to cooperate in the same namespace, because I have yet to see any mesh support that. And if you think that's what you're running into, I would love to talk to you about what that looks like for you and what you would expect to have happen.
I would also be very interested in hearing. Yeah.
Yeah. And sorry, for context, Mike and I are the co-leads for Gamma, which is why we're the ones who are jumping on this grenade or something like that.
Sure.
If you only have one mesh in a namespace, I think the disambiguation rules as we currently have them are sufficient. But again, if you think you're running in situations where that is not true, that would be really good for us to hear about.
Okay. I guess where's the best place to continue this conversation?
You can find both of us on Slack, and that's probably simplest. And we can schedule other meetings as needed or whatever.
Cool.
Or as mentioned previously, starting a GitHub discussion under the Gateway API, that would work too if you
also
want to like drop context async in a place that'll be less likely to disappear than Slack.
Yep.
Oh, that's true. All right, then I think I'll do that just so there's a record of it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. We are at time. And so, yeah, thank you, everybody, and see you next time.
Thank you,
Have fun.
folks.